Today, I want to start with a quote by John F. Kennedy, and it's that a rising tide lifts all boats. I heard this for the first time a few years ago, pertaining to something quite different. And I think JFK was talking about economics, but I think it's perfect. A rising tide lifts all boats. I think it speaks to what mystical sisterhood is doing and how women are coming together in community, partnering and collaborating on their dreams, whether it be in our work or in our relationships or in the conversations we hold. It's really in whatever we are bringing to life. So that rising tide relates to the women's rising and rising together. And I always have that visual of kind of taking and holding hands and doing this together. It's more fun when we do. It gives us the bolstering we need and that confidence when we can't access it ourselves. And so this is why we're here today to talk about community, to talk about that rising tide, about really having each other's backs and supporting one another and exposing ourselves to new ideas. In the past 2 weeks, I've talked about our deep and sacred connection to ourselves in episode 51. And in episode 52, what the meaning of the mystical is to each of us. And so let's dive into community today. I first have to say it's been such an amazing year of getting to know my guests, my listeners, and myself more deeply in the process. I love that Mystical Sisterhood is becoming a vehicle or a mode, a way we get to more inspiration, a way we can be more educated, and for your individual transformation and our transformation as a collective. This podcast, I believe, allows us to join together in this shared sisterhood. Absolutely no, we're not alone on life's journey. And like I've said before, bringing our dreams to life. That was an unexpected portal that's opening up. I wanted to originally bring joy and healing into the same space. And then it's all become about connection, how we're connected to self, to the mystical, and to each other. I've been so inspired personally by the women streaming through the doors of Mystical Sisterhood, so willing to share themselves and what they've brought to life. And I know you're listening, the listener, as we go along. And the more I go along, the more I'm interested in what you have to say. This line is really long, and sometimes I feel like it's like a visual of people just lining up to be a part of this sisterhood. And I feel like even our ancestors are showing up with their untold stories. Isn't that the coolest visual? I love this idea and concept too of when we heal, the ancestry before us heals and the lineage to come. So let's kind of dive into community and transformation that can occur when we're in our community together. One thing that I have seen, and I believe this is a transformative process that's going on, is that as women, when we release our voice, allow it to come out, when we bring our work or our wisdom or our experiences into the world, this can lend towards our inner transformation. And what I'm really thinking of here is that I've seen it through the eyes of the podcast when I've asked more than a handful of the women who've come on, would you be my guest on the podcast? I think that you have something valuable to share. And they might have responded, why me? You probably wouldn't be able to tell if you've listened to many of the interviews, all of the interviews, which of those women that kind of hesitated and said, why me, Maureen? Because I was able to see in them, and this is such a gift. And I'm not saying I'm gifted, I'm just saying it's a gift when we can see something in another woman and say, that's something there. And I think you should pay attention to it. But anyway, back to the podcast. I'll tell them because I know you have a message to share that this community and my listeners could benefit from. And the transformation that occurs is when they allowed themselves to believe it and to give themselves permission to come on and give themselves this allowance and grace to share their excitement about what they value and love, there was a transformation that the women would say to me happened on the other side of it. Like maybe their business bloomed. It's something opened within their world. And like I always say, like going back to ourselves, there was an opening within, just a willingness to let themselves go there and then make themselves vulnerable and shed away some stuff that wasn't serving them anymore. So that's like one mode of transformation that I've seen happen. Another one is that when we come together to embrace new thoughts and new ways of accessing information through the episodes, it supports us from moving from an old paradigm to new paradigm. And sort of like that shift from the old to the new is what I mean is, globally, I kind of mean like old systems that worked for us and the ways of doing things are no longer really working anymore. But just as we talked about last in episode 52 about, what is the mystical, it's even having a new paradigm of women talking about the things that speak to their heart, that open their heart, that speak to the soul. And right then and there, when we do that, and I'm going to add, when we do so unapologetically, and we're not really concerned with what the other person is going to think. We're more concerned about what we need to express right there. It's shifting from an older paradigm to the newer paradigm. And I believe all these things are processes. I'm not saying they haven't been happening for some time, but within the scope of what Mystical Sisterhood is and what we're doing here, these are some things I'm seeing. And I've always been, I don't know how you resonate with this. I've always been one very, very tuned into these old ways are not working anymore. And I think another one that I think that's going to come through a lot in the next year is the ways in which women in an older paradigm were taught to shame or blame or judge or criticize themselves. We as a collective are coming together and saying, you know what? It's not really working for us anymore. We know on an individual level that those things don't work for us. How can we kind of be together in community and support and say, hey, let's do this together. You do that to yourself too. Oh, I do too. And like, let's really, let's really make an intention and hold a vision that like, whoa, we can move through life without all that baggage that wasn't even freaking ours to begin with. So that's definitely a transformation from the old to the new. I love this next one. Women across, I'm going to say life, let's just say life, as partners and collaborators. And this transformation of where have we come from scarcity and not enoughness for all of us, that we can kind of think of that in our own lives is as I've created my business, some of the social media and the information out there, is kind of, I don't know, it's like underneath the ethers of, she's doing that, you're not doing enough, you need to be doing this. And I was thinking about this morning as I was getting ready to record, like just that, like, we need to have patience with our process too. And I thought like that patience with our process, that's going to be a whole episode. So I'm going to like bookmark that a little bit. But this idea that if we look around and if I look around the room of who's been on in Mystical Sisterhood and who's been in my membership and the Facebook page, when we hold each other with like admiration and encouragement, we all rise. So again, that rising tide lifts all boats. And tell me that you have noticed that this is an energetic feeling. It's really energetic. It's in the energy. And if I'm holding the energy of like, hey, I'm not just saying this, but I truly believe it. I believe we can be here with each other. I believe there's enough for all of us. I believe that energetically we can support one another. We can set boundaries. We can do all the things. But that it's like a real belief system, and setting that belief system out of like, let's collaborate. Let's put away any not enoughness, not enough for all of us, and just be in this really abundant community together. And going into, I wanted to add a little bit more of that I had kind of thought about when we move from a consciousness or a mindset of scarcity to abundance. So, I think it's big in culture right now. Like, how do you live an abundant life? How do you create more abundance? But this feeling of abundance, it's something that is internal to us. So when we're feeling abundant, and we're going to be more likely to manifest. Those are two words that are used a lot in today's culture, and they're beautiful words. But I feel like we have to go through the experience of what abundance feels like. And that experience is going to lead us to feeling more of it inside. So I'm always going to sprinkle my intentions of mystical sisterhood and the community that I've created in that I want to hold you in a field of abundant energy that sees your truth in your light, that sees, then supports you in teasing out the things that just weigh you down, to see a vision for you, for me, for all of us of rising higher. That tide is rising higher. There's a generosity of spirit here that I've been feeling, and bringing up, like I would say, the souls, the vibration of our souls and the vibration of the world. So it's a ripple effect. It really is. I didn't mean to bring in the whole water and kind of the tides and the all the analogies and metaphors there, but it's really, water is a great metaphor, and just the flow and the ease, and that we're not just the one wave on our own, but we're the collective waves of that whole sea. And I just love the sea as well, because the sea tides change, and we are called to change as well. And lastly, I think the transformation is that each of the women coming forward has either been a representative in a way of showing us that she had chosen to either add to an original calling that she may have had in life, or he, and then how they have grown sort of exponentially by heeding the calls, heeding their intuition, heeding what's come into their path, and seizing it and saying, I'm worth it. And when I surround myself with messages that I can do it and it's possible, that these second iterations of themselves, and it's second is like, that's too quantitative in a way, it's another just iteration and unfolding, a manifestation, like all the things. So I guess it is that we've seen examples of the transformation. And I really think, as much as this podcast has largely been about the guests that I've had on and me as the host, it's really about you, where you stand in your life. And if I could, come through the microphone, come through the podcast, and sit in rooms with you all and hear your stories and hear what's relevant for you, it's kind of like my greatest desire. I think that that's such a beautiful vision I hold for my future. And if it could be so easy, but that's why I created the Mystical Sisterhood membership community, because that's really my vision for that, coming together, having important conversations, bouncing things off one another, saying, this is the fears that I have coming up, this is where I get stuck, and just finding the ways, the tools, because there's so many of us, well, experiencing those things, but there's so many tools. And it's kind of like a hope of the podcast too, is like something these podcasts have given to you is that there is just phrase, or I have a dear friend who always says, like, she loves just like the quotes, and they kind of stick with you, right? And I tell you, those quotes can change your life. So I'm going to say, when I tell you that I did not have a vision of me sitting with a microphone, putting myself out into the world 2 years ago, gosh, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, it's not a stretch. Like, I never saw this happening, but I followed the breadcrumbs. I followed the signs. I leaned into and trusted them more and more. And I have always been on the other side, I believe, of listening to women say, if I can do it, you can do it. And I would say, no, it's not possible. She's got the eloquence of being able to draw people together. She's got the skill set of believing in herself and speaking on stage, let's say, or, going for the advanced degree or the certification that's going to uplift her life. Or, I just didn't believe it. I don't know why. I held myself in a corner. And then then I began, like I said, I began to answer the call and the universe calling. It's such a good image too. And at some point, I think what happened for me is when I was surrounded by messages that saw what was possible even for me and women saying it to me and suggesting it, or I would see women out there doing things I admired. When I saw the passion in her eyes, I began to think maybe she's right. Maybe it could be me. And the seed was planted. And of course, she was right because she is you, she is me, we are each other. And we just can't see it, the shadows and the dark corners and the limiting beliefs. As Valerie Wood shared in episode 52, A Journey into the Mystical and the Magical, women are stepping into areas they never knew were possible. And as we witness the possibility together in community, it truly becomes possible for the collective. And I'm going to out myself again by saying, if you would have predicted me being a representative for most things mystical, I would have bet money on the fact that it couldn't happen. If you would have said, "Oh, Maureen, you're going to be having this podcast where you talk about all these mystical ideas that people have thought were so out there for so long," I would have said, "No, that's going to be someone else. That's not going to be me." I had a lot of limiting beliefs operating, and I would love to do just an episode on limiting beliefs and what they look like for us, what they've looked like for me, what they've looked like for my clients, what they look like for you. Because belief systems and limiting beliefs are powerful. And I think so much of what we experience in life and choices we've made were based on conditioning. Conditioning is powerful. and and we can't negate it. The voices and the stories continue to be added to this beautiful tapestry of our sisterhood. Yours is here too as you listen, your story, your experience, your life, and take what you will into your own life from what I've said, what's been shared. It's my dream to have as many women gather and share their dreams and what is coming up in life in them and for them. There is truly nothing more magical than witnessing the birthing process. So many women I have talked to, including myself, went through a lot of life thinking they weren't smart enough, not creative enough. Again, back to the limiting beliefs. We will do that in one of our membership talks in January. But also, I think there's going to be an episode in that too. I'm in awe when I hear yet another woman share her truth and say she felt these ways too. When we hear other women echo something that we've thought maybe for years, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. And it's vulnerable to share these things. That's what I see in our community, a willingness to say what we may not have felt safe saying in our lives before, places we carry or have carried shame. And what I know, and I think that you know too, is more and more that we're more alike than we are different. And when we shed away what isn't ours to carry anymore and have safe spaces and places to share, we evolve, we grow, we shift, we transform, and we begin to see ourselves once again in our original wholeness. I invite you to share these collective visions with me, add your visions as well, ones where the new paradigms are filling our consciousness and we celebrate one another, where we not only inspire one another, but we also inspire and lead the next generation and those that follow. So, leaving you going forward with the intentions, I think I've named a lot of them, but the ones that I hold for our shared sisterhood is my hope that the growing mystical sisterhood community is a space where we claim our gifts, kind of tease apart what they are, and move into the outer world and share them unapologetically with one another. Over the last year in the Mystical Sisterhood membership, we have focused on bringing the mystical into our lives more and more and trusting it. That's been a lot of fun. And through guest experts talking about intuition, accessing your authenticity, understanding relationship dynamics, there's just it adds to, even if there's more communities out there in the world, and of course there are, but when we can create yet another one that's so rich in these transformative experiences, I just say bring them on. Upcoming gatherings in the membership include taking a deep look at our limiting beliefs, like I just noted. That's at the end of January. Spaces to share what you're working on and what you're creating, and place to be inspired, envisioning your next year at the start of next year. When we do the exploration of what's most connective for us, what speaks to us directly, and what lights us up, it just makes life more vibrant. And I think that ties back to the original intention for Mystical Sisterhood, which was joy and healing co-occurring in the same space. That will always be, that's like the undertones of it all. The other day, I caught up with a dear friend who she has been in the membership. She's from my hometown, and we were able to share a conversation for about an hour, all things invested in what another was doing, lots of things mystical and what we were studying or reading or reaching for, and then how we were transforming those things and what we've learned into bringing them into the world. I always say that I think that there's 3 stages we go through. It's the awareness, and my members have told me that too. A lot of times it's like, Maureen, I'm new to the conversation. I'm becoming aware of the language you're using. I love it. And I'm going to sit here for a while. I'm going to sit and marinate in it. And then we move into the integration phases where we bring it more and more into our lives. We begin to practice it. We're like, ooh, I like that. I'm going to try it. And then we move to the embodiment. And that's when we're starting to live full out with the principles we want to live by. And that's personally what I want to live more in. How about you? In whatever form it takes, please promise me that in this new year, you'll be joining a community to bring the mystical and the magical alive in your lives. And if that's mine, it would be my pleasure to have you. You can find a direct link in the show notes or by signing up to my weekly newsletter, or visit mysticalsisterhood.com. And you will see that joining is easy. Filling out a form will get you onboarded right away. As I always say, I'd love to have your presence. I'd love to have your voice. I'd love to have your energy. And I'd love to have your wisdom. So thank you for being here. This podcast truly allows the abundance of gratitude to spill forth from me. I hope that you can feel that and you experience it. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit maureenspielman.com or mysticalsisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.